because you're jumping back into the gap. Outlet to coach, it's either sideline, 2 on the side, 3 on the side. That's off the second cut. Lead the country in offensive rebounding.
Hey, Coach. Welcome to the Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Oliver. Let's share the game. Looking for a gift for a coach who loves basketball coaching? Get them a membership to basketballimmersion.com so they can join thousands of coaches who are stimulating their coaching with a world-leading platform for basketball coach education. Go to basketballimmersion.com/sign-up to get them a gift during this special time of year.
Coach's real treat today. We have 2 people on the podcast. This is our first father-son and what I hope will be coaching duos coming up as another opportunity for us to be able to learn on the basketball podcast. But with me today is Ryan Odom, who has been on the podcast previously from UMBC and has won 20 games every year. He's been there, and most famously, I guess you'll always be remembered in history for 16 beating number 1. So welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Chris, for having me on. I appreciate it.
And no need to go deep into the background. Everyone who listens to the podcast knows who Dave Odom is, and amazing to have you here. University of South Carolina, Wake Forest, East Carolina head coach, won over 400 games at the NCAA level. Coach Odom, honored to have you on the podcast. Thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure, and I sure appreciate you asking me and give me a chance to visit with you and certainly with Ryan.
Well, I thought that was great synergy in that. And Ryan, thanks for the suggestion when I reached out about your dad possibly being on the podcast. This was actually your idea to do it together. So What was your thought process with that?
Well, I think there's a lot of coaches that have coached the game and kind of forged their own way. And then they've had sons that have gone on to coach as well and kind of follow in their father's footsteps. So I thought it might be a good idea for you to try to get some of those father-son tandems that are out there. And there's certainly a lot of them. And it's really cool to see, kind of get deep into it, with, what it's like for the family in a lot of ways. And I thought it would be interesting for folks to hear.
Well, hey, Ryan, I just happened to think of something. We ought to get our own team, encourage the Patinos and the Millers and the Hurleys and the Beelines and let them get their own team, and let's have a MT father-son tournament. How about that?
I like it.
I think sponsors are lining up right now. That's awesome. And just to clarify, obviously, any mother-daughters or mother-sons and father-daughters, et cetera, as well, will eventually reach out to all and hopefully appeal to all as well. But Ryan, let's start with you. Just talk about following in your father's footsteps. And those are some pretty big footsteps.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think, my background, I think Dad will tell you, I was not interested in coaching, when I was still playing in college at Hampton-Sydney. My thought process at that particular time, I won't bore you with the details, but it was to go into the world of finance and do that. Part of the reason was, back when Dad was coaching, whether he was an assistant at Virginia at the time or head coach at his different stops, he was obviously a great father, great husband, but at the same time, he was married to his job as well, and his job required him to be gone a lot. And back then, the rules were different. It wasn't as restrictive. Guys could be gone, recruiters could be gone, weeks at a time. In the summers, he was gone working 5-star basketball camp. And so that lifestyle, initially for me, was a little bit of a pause. It gave me a little bit of pause. But as it was time to decide what I wanted to do when I was graduating from college, I was not ready to give up the game that I love so much that he had introduced me to. At that point, my brother was coaching at that time at, I believe, Charlotte, maybe even Missouri, heading on to Missouri. Actually, it was Alabama is where he was. And Dad was kind of at the height of his career, and I wanted to give it a whirl. And Seth Greenberg gave me a great opportunity to do that.
All right, tremendous. And Coach Odom, what were your thoughts when your kids went into coaching? Was that a happy time for you?
It was bittersweet. I knew all of the joys and the things that you get out of coaching. The joy of the locker room, the joy of practices, the joy of getting ready for the next game, the joy in the off season when you're working with individuals to improve their game and improve themselves as human beings, and the joy of big games and Sunday afternoons and all of the things that go into coaching at the level that I'd been blessed to coach at. But I also knew about the lonely nights on your way home from a game that you felt like your team had thrown away, or we hadn't played our very best, and the other team, underdog maybe, has come in and beat us, or even a dead even game against one of our arch rivals that we let slip away. So it was a time when Ryan was making up his mind, and I'll give you one particular night. I tell this story often when Ryan's involved, and we were getting one of our infrequent family dinners in Charlottesville, and he was home for the weekend or vacation, whatever it happened to be. And I asked him, maybe his mother even asked him, said, have you thought much about what you're going to do next year? And he said, yeah, I think I want to coach. And everybody's head snapped around. I mean, like what? We hadn't heard. And I said to him, I said, I never heard you say that. I didn't know you were entertaining that. He said, well, looks like you're doing pretty good. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, everywhere you travel, you got an air travel card, you got a credit card from the university, you got a courtesy car from a local car dealer. Most of the meals that you eat are free. You're out on the road. You see all these countries and places that you go. And I said, whoa. I said, you've forgotten, or you never knew about the number of times that I washed towels at Durham High School by myself on Christmas Eve. I mean, I'm up there on Christmas Eve. We got a tournament not on Christmas Day, but the next day. So I got to get the towels ready. I hear the leak coming out of the faucets, and I mean, everything's not like it seems. You got to get in there and grunt a little bit. Dad, I've made up my mind. That's what I want to do. I said, well, then let's plan it and go for it. And he did.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you don't start obviously where you ended. And that's the key part of that. But coaches, both of you can maybe chime in a little bit, but there's advantages beyond just having your dad who's a coach. It's also the access, as we talked a little bit about off air, the access to the network. So it's not just learning from your dad, but you've got all these other coaches that are around your dad you get a chance to learn from. Was that a big benefit as well, Ryan, in terms of exposing you?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, I certainly would not be, where I am right now if it wasn't for obviously Dad's hard work, starting out as a high school coach, driving the local kids there, not even just from his high school team, but others from other teams, John Lucas and those beyond that were, born and raised in that Durham area, to 5-star camp, where he began to meet, and befriend so many coaches that have impacted, our lives in such a positive way. Dad was fortunate that he took the job at Durham High School, and Chuck Daly and Hubie Brown and, the others that were on that staff at that particular time at Duke, allowed him to come over there and watch practice and introduced him to Howard Garfinkel. I probably wouldn't be sitting where I am right now. I definitely wouldn't be sitting where I am right now if that had not happened. And then you take it a step further, the coaches that he worked for and with, both as an assistant coach and then later on as a head coach, have impacted my life and belief, in the game and what it's all about in a major way. Talk about Jeff Jones, who, was just finishing playing at Virginia when Dad became an assistant there. Well, later on, he hired me. Seth Greenberg, who was at Virginia that magical year when they went to the Final Four, hired me at South Florida, gave me my first chance. Larry Davis, who worked for Dad at Wake Forest, gave me an opportunity to coach. And so many more. Watching Coach Holland and Coach Larinaga, Coach Littlepage, way back when I was a youngster at UVA, watching them and how they interacted with Rick Carlisle and Ralph Sampson and all those great players that played there. I mean, just very blessed. And, I think the key thing for me going forward from there was, yes, using the contacts in the appropriate way, but also going to do the work on your own at the same time. And I think whether right or wrong, I think Dad made it a point for me to never work for him directly. And I think he felt that was the right way to go. And certainly it forced me to kind of go out on my own with a little nudge, from him and his friends to kind of get me going. But ultimately, you got to, like any profession, you got to do the work. And I've been very blessed, like you said.
Dave, maybe you can talk to that, because that would be similar to a player playing in your program, as being an assistant in your program, and then becoming a head coach. they would only be really exposed to your philosophy. So was that part of your mindset in telling Ryan that he should work for other people?
I really think that's true. It's something that, some people look at and say, well, I look at it a different way. I'd prefer having my son or daughter, depending on the case, come into the program and kind of let me tutor them and mentor them as they go along. And I certainly wouldn't argue with anybody that feels that that's the right way. But I think in Ryan's case, I felt all along that he was confident enough in his own abilities. Not that they were refined or anything like that when he got out of college, but he had a certain it that I didn't think others might have. That being a level of confidence that it takes to be successful in whatever endeavor you decide to go into. And I felt if we could get him in the right systems, under the right people, that he would be able to garner something very, very important from each of those coaches. And he's mentioned them pretty much, but I mean, it started off with Larry Davis at Wofford. I may not get them in the exact right order, but
Furman.
I guess Seth Greenberg first, maybe.
Seth Greenberg was first, and then Larry at Furman.
And then Eddie Biedenbach at UNC Asheville taught him. It'd be interesting, Chris, if you just asked Ryan what each of those stops meant to him, what each of those coaches meant to him. Ryan, give him something. I mean, what did you learn from Seth Greenberg? What did you learn from Larry Davis? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Seth Greenberg, obviously one of the best coaches I've been around, but his work ethic. I mean, he worked as a head coach like assistants should work, like extremely hard. He outworked everybody in the office, and his attention to detail, tremendous. His ability to coach the game, not only in practice and teach and develop, but also within the game, was exceptional. His kind of back against the wall, come out fighting mentality permeated the program, both at South Florida and then also at Virginia Tech, where I was fortunate enough to work for him. Larry Davis was very similar in that regard. Larry, extremely hard worker, grit, tough, had the ability to get on guys and really, wake them up in practice or in the game, but also he had an innate ability to let them know how much he cared about them and loved them. Like that, his players knew that they were loved, and they might be mad at him in that particular moment, but that doesn't change how he felt about them as people. Eddie Biedenbach, I was only there 1 year, but what an amazing coach he was. I mean, he was in the finals. I mean, he took Asheville in a tough situation and all of a sudden turned it around and made multiple NCAA tournaments. And part of that was his ability to never get too high or never get too low, but just to keep coaching. The balance, the optimism that he had was evident. He knew that by the time his team got to conference, they were going to be right in the mix to win it. And it didn't matter what year it was going to be. He was going to play a murderer's schedule. I mean, he was going to play 9 guarantee games. I remember that year I was there, I was like a wreck because we started out 1-11, and he was like, "Hey, chill, we're going to be good. We got this." I was like, I'm not sure about that. But at the end, he was right. We were in the championship, and we lost to a great Winthrop team. Jeff Jones was the most well-balanced, coach from an offense and a defensive perspective, that I've been around. I mean, I had so much fun, working for him. He obviously is known, as a defensive coach, but I'll tell you, offensively, he knew where his team's strengths were, and he would attack those strengths that they had on every possession. And we knew we were going to be in games. All right. And part of that wasn't because we were more talented than the other team, but it was because he knew, how to coach his guys in games and in practice and really play on the strengths of the players and make those come out in games. And, an excellent coach. So,
hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris, let me interrupt one more time and I get quiet here. He has left out maybe the most important coach of all. When you look at UMBC play today, if you know anything at all about basketball, you see Tony Shavers, who was the head coach at Hampton-Sydney when Ryan was coming through. You see that style of play. Now, Ryan, am I right or am I wrong? I mean, because we don't leave that out now.
Yeah, no doubt. And that was a huge part of my development, playing for Coach Shaver, 4 years, going through great times. I mean, we followed a great team, our freshman class that came in, and we had a really young squad my freshman year. And, Coach Shaver played for Dean Smith. And so we learned that Carolina system, inside and out. And it was a pressing, attacking, free-flowing motion offense. And he really coached his guys to be confident. In a lot of ways, it's kind of where you saw, Shaka Smart's teams at VCU play and how they played. Well, very similar to how we played at Hampton-Sydney. And it was a really fun style of play. That was where I learned, like, when you're a player and you play up and down, it's a lot of fun. And I'm not saying that playing slow and winning by 2 isn't either, and because it's fun to win regardless. But when you're a guy that likes to get up and down and shoot and be athletic and drive to the basket and make plays and be unselfish, it's a great style of play. And he certainly allowed us to do that. He had great confidence in his players, and he made you believe that you could win.
Well, I can hear the influence there because you talked about that in the last podcast, and you're just tremendous about that, the freedom and style of play that you talked about there. And Dave, maybe let's circle back to you with this. Let's say you're watching Ryan's team play now and you don't agree with something he's doing or you don't like something he's doing. How do you handle that now? Like, what's the process? Because I think that process exists for a lot of parents and a lot of different methods and different venues. But what do you do nowadays?
How do I handle it?
Poorly. Yeah, poorly. I was going to say. Yeah, I love the honesty.
No, well, Ryan and I have I think, a great relationship beyond father-son. I'm an older basketball coach. I see the game through my prism. He is younger. He sees the game through his. I have learned since he's been a head coach, beginning at Lenore Ryan through his 3 years there at UMBC, he's got his own idea about how the game should be played. And I think in the last couple of years, I've gotten better at looking at that and saying, I couldn't coach that way, but he can, and it's just, he, as he was describing Tony Shaver, and, he gives confidence to his players and he gives them some leeway, maybe that some of the teams that I coached, their players, they didn't have that. We were much more structured. Although I have to say his team is structured, but they're structured at a different pace than mine. But I believed in, still do, I believe in more of a balanced attack, inside, outside. But when I look at his team play, and there's something in my mind that glaringly either is wrong or needs to be adjusted or attended to or looked at or discussed about, I'm not in the least afraid to mention it to him. What I have done is I've tried to pick my spots more.
That's what I was waiting for.
Yeah. If Vermont kicks his butt by 35, which has happened one time, and I try to talk to him after that game, that's a bad move. I don't do that. So I think I've learned from that kind of thing. But I do talk to him about the game and some of the things that I see. I mean, the other day we were talking about his team this year, and I think he has a multi-talented team. I don't know if it'd be better than last year or the year before or whatever. He's got a lot of ability on his team. And I said to him, the biggest problem you've got now is figuring out how to play your personnel together. You got so many good guys. I mean, a starting lineup, those 5 don't just pop out at you. I mean, you've got a lot of guys who are capable of playing at a high level. And I said that to him last week. You've got to really work on your personnel, how you're going to integrate that into the total team.
Well, it's great. I mean, timing is everything in terms of those conversations, and that's great advice to everyone. And Ryan, maybe back to you then. What are a few things that still stay with your philosophy or your X's and O's that you learned from your dad? Is there something that still is stuck with you? I mean, that's not to discount every experience you had with your dad, but What are some specific things that you still use or you still apply?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go backwards a little bit because I did want to mention one thing about, the father-son relationship, both in the same business. It's interesting to me, and I'm not answering your question right now, but it's interesting to me how the roles have kind of reversed now, right? So when I was a kid, and call it high school or whatever, I had to pick my spots too, because I was a high school kid and I thought I knew everything at that point. So, they'd be playing Carolina or whatever, and they'd end up, either winning or losing the game. And he would walk in from the game and sit in his little chair that he used to sit in. And I'd be sitting on the couch and it's kind of quiet or whatever. And then I'd have to interject and give my thoughts as to what happened. Why'd you do this? Or why'd you do that? And so I learned a lot just sitting in there, in the living room with him, after a game, just talking about what happened. Why didn't you play this guy more or that guy? And, my sons do that to me now. I'll come home. Why didn't you play him more? Why didn't you do this? And you get these great questions, that come up that, make you think. But, when I watch Dad, with his teams, obviously the defense, is an area that, I've had to get better at as a coach. And I've had assistant coaches that have really helped me with that. But I've also had my dad, that's helped me with that, become a better coach. Because when I first became a head coach, it was all about the offense. I wanted to score a zillion points, and we wanted to outscore the opponent, make a lot of threes, and just have fun doing it. As I've gotten older and a little bit more experienced, the balance of the two obviously is so extremely important, and that's how Dad's teams played. And so, if you ask me one thing, that I learned from him, it was about the balance of both, getting the right shot for the right player each and every time down, and your team knowing that, when to dribble, when to pass, when to shoot. He always used to say that. Great players know when to dribble it, when to pass it, when to shoot it. It sounds very simple, but as you go watch games, they don't know it a lot of times. And your job as a coach is to get them to understand when to do that within your offense and when is the right time for this particular player to get the ball. And then defensively, just, having your principles and philosophy there. I mean, his was very, very sound, and he was going to make you score over a body. If you could do that, you could probably have a good chance of winning. All right. But the percentages were not always in your favor. And his teams were always in games. There was other teams that had more talent than his, but his team was in the game and had a chance to win at the end. He had a great staff dynamic, throughout his career. His assistant coaches were tremendous for him and still lifelong friends. And so, I think all of that kind of goes together. The importance of it's not one guy, it's not one head coach, it's everybody being in tune and connected with what's most important. While the head coach sets the vision, and Dad was really, really good at setting the vision for his programs.
Dave, I guess back to you then. Is there anything in the more modern game, whether it's better or not, obviously you can decide, but the modern game that you enjoy that's changed? Like something that's changed in the game that you enjoy now more?
I think I enjoy the skill set that the coaches have brought to the modern day player or to the current player. Back when I was my best coaching back in let's say the turn of the decade here, the perimeter guys were all very, very good. They had good skills and everything, but I think when you look at the game today, I mean, it's 4 or 5 men that have perimeter skill set that, that I had from my players back in the day. And but they were mostly perimeters. So, when you look at, let's just say the NBA today, I mean, last night, Anthony Davis got 40 points and something like 20 rebounds or something. I mean, that's an incredible stat line. And, you just don't see that, or you didn't see that back in the day. I'm not sure that's better. I don't know if it's worse, but it's different. So I really think that we're at a crossroads from a basketball standpoint. When you look at the NBA, I think the lords of the NBA have decided that they want the stars to be stars. You know what I mean? In other words, defensively, you can't touch them. They've got to have free movement. You got to let the player with the ball go as far as he can go, cut through the lane without the ball. Those kind of things lend itself to a big, wide open offensive game. You know, that's the reason that let's just look at the NBA. Teams like Phoenix, Memphis, Sacramento, Orlando, New Orleans, and we'll see what happens now that Zion's down there. I mean, those kind of teams have a really, really hard time because they're not allowed to do the things that they could do to mitigate the offense of the LeBron James, the Anthony Davises, the Stephen Currys, the Russell Westbrooks, Chris Pauls, the James Hardens, those guys. You got to have a way to get to those guys to mitigate their abilities. If not, you're going to lose every single time. And I think we've got to be careful at the collegiate level that we don't let that happen. Football, if you think about it, has already gotten to that. I mean, everybody worries about whether there should be a 4-game, 14 playoff or an 18 playoff. I don't think it matters. It's going to be the same 4 teams every time because of the way the rules are. I mean, right now, you ask me who's going to be the same teams or who going to be the teams in the playoff, not this coming January, but a year from now, I would tell you Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and give me one more. I don't know who the other one is. That's who it's going to be.
Yeah.
We don't want college basketball to get to that.
Yeah, it's interesting how the game's changed clearly. And then that speaks back to, Ryan, your upbringing in the game that was completely different. And you've had to modernize, obviously, to keep up, and a part of that with recruiting, right, as well, in terms of those things. So do you have any thoughts on parts of the game that you like better or you miss from your dad's era?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the 3-point shot coming into play now and the importance of being able to not only make that shot, but defend that shot. There's pressure to do that, to do both, because it's certainly a game changer. I mean, I can remember watching prior to the 3-point line being introduced, and teams would be running these methodical offenses and they would pass up elbow jump shots, you know, just to get it deeper into the post. And it's totally changed, you know, since, you know, that was back when Dad was coaching at UVA at the time. And Carolina was running that motion offense and they're moving and screening. And literally, I can remember Joe Wolf passing up elbow shots to throw it down to, you know, whoever his other big guy was down there. And you know, that's definitely changed. You know, I think and then the ability, like I said, to guard the 3, you know, is really important, you know, because the court is, when it's properly spaced and guys are allowed to be free, like Dad was talking about, it is really, really tough to defend without fouling. And it's tough to get help in there. And you got to give up something. You know, it goes back to you know, what are you willing to give up? And, you know, what do you see in that, Dad, nowadays, the 3-point line? Like, would you do anything differently than what you see out there? I mean, obviously there's a ball screen most times on every possession. I mean, would you do something differently than what you have done in the past? I know you've talked to me about, you know, squeezing in a pick and roll situation as opposed to trapping or whatever. What are your general thoughts there in terms of A, ball screen defense, 2, guarding the 3-point line?
Well, let's go back just a little bit as I listen to you talk. This year, one of the rule changes is they moved the line back, how much? I don't know, 1 foot and 1.9 feet or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. I think it's a foot, something like that. I don't know the exact number. Close.
All right. I looked it up, or I had some of our staff that helps me with our podcast look it up, and the average percentage of all 3-point shots taken at collegiate basketball last year hovered right around 35%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people are just they're not knocking that thing down enough to really, to me, cause you to move the thing back. I don't know why the rules committee moved it back. If
Yeah,
you
we
can't
heard
make
that.
it from 30,
We shot below
35,
that.
do what?
I said we shot below that, so we heard that.
I know. I mean, well, why would they move it back? I mean, it's going to be less effective now than it was. I don't understand that, but I use that as a backdrop to answer your question. I'm still a big believer in when you set up defensively. I always try to teach my players, you guard your man and one more. The one more being, if your man does not have the ball, you've got to play him for the things that could happen and the things that he could do, whether it's screen, whether it's receive a screen, whether it's become a cutter, whether it's use a screen. You've got to be able to do all of that, but you've also got to lend help to your defensive buddy who is guarding the ball. So you guard two men at one time, your man with or without the ball, and then the other person with or without the ball, depending. And the other thing that I think coaches do not do a good job of today is I am a big believer that you should stay between your man and the basket. If you do that, then everything has to go over the top. And players don't shoot the ball well over the top. They just don't. And I think there should be a greater emphasis on guarding your man with the ball, guarding the dribbler, being able to corral him and not allow him to get by you. You got too much of this one-on-one dribble between their legs, back behind their backs, and here they go, and they spin one time and come back and fall back. Lord of mercy, how much can you do? Just stay right there and make them shoot over you, and I think you'll be much, much better off. You can get to the post a whole lot easier that way as well. So I don't know exactly what the Virginia defense is all about. I look at it and I just say it's good, solid defense. They don't ever overextend themselves where they can get to the post if they need to double that. And then when the ball is kicked back out, they're really good at recovering. But they usually have four guys in the lane and one guy on the ball outside. And I think that's good defense.
Yeah. And Coach, what you're saying speaks to, a little bit of the modern analytics, which is, stay between your check and the basket and, give up contested mid-range. That's the goal. So in a sense, I mean, your defense was basically what people would argue you should be doing nowadays. The challenge is obviously getting people off the 3-point line. So it's awesome hearing your thoughts on that. The 3-point line, Ryan, correct me, moving it back isn't about the quality of the 3-point shooting. It's just that defense at the NCAA level is so good that teams don't have as much space. So the idea is to create more space, I imagine, right? Which for you must be excited about. More space is better for your offense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we actually, make it a point, to play well behind the 3-point line and practice. I'm talking about before they moved it back so that we could have more space. So those closeouts that, Dad was talking about were longer. And if you're always playing right on the 3-point line, well, teams are really, really good at sitting in the lane and then coming back to you effectively to take away not only the shot, but also the drive. And so if you can shoot well behind the line, well, then that's going to not only obviously making that shot is huge for your team, but it's also giving you more space to be able to work with so you can, attack a guy, a weak closeout or whatever the situation, or just simply move it quicker. And now that guy's, coming from a baseline recovery all the way out to the weak side corner. Well, that's a long closeout. And to Dad's point, players are way more skilled than they used to be. And they can put that ball on the deck, really well. And, spacing is key, for any good offense.
So the modern game certainly has presented some different challenges for us, but let's circle back a little bit because with two parents here, I know one of the questions that I get asked a lot is just about dealing with parents in general, having obviously been a father-son combination in terms of growing up in the game, but also both being parents. Do you have any advice to high school parents, to parents in general at the youth level, some different things, or advice to coaches in terms of supporting their philosophy in terms of approaching parents?
Yeah, I mean, I could take that one and then let Dad give his thoughts. I mean, I can kind of explain how Mom and Dad, treated me and my brother as a kid. They let us chase what we wanted. And what I mean by that is chase your own dreams. And, the parents can't want it more than the child, right? I mean, I think Dad introduced me to basketball, obviously made it apparent that basketball was really important to him and had been very good to our family. That round ball has been tremendous to the Odom family. But at the same time, there was no, all right, well, you have to do this. You're going to do this, Ryan. And, this is your future. This is your ticket. He allowed me to make my own decision, whether to even play or not play. And, I think nowadays, too many parents, it's not all parents, but there's so many trainers, there's so many, folks out there in addition to the regular coaches, that it's become totally a year-round thing. And I think some of these kids get burned out, and part of it can be tracked back to the parents' desire for their kids to be really good in the sport. And it's got to be the kids' passion. Passion should drive what's happening with that particular child. And do they love it or not? Are they willing to be tired and wake up at 6 a.m. on their own and go get shots up with a coach? Or are you having to make them do that? And I think therein lies part of the problem. Kids are being pushed to do things as opposed to introduced. Do you love it? All right. Well, then I'm going to help you. If you really love it and you want to do it, I'm going to go as hard as I can to help you, kid, to put you in the right position to be successful. But I'm not going to make you. You got to love it.
Coach Odom, anything to add?
Yeah. A couple of things here. When Ryan was coming out of junior high school, going into high school ball, first thing, he had a really good high school coach as well. Somebody that taught really good defense and offense and that kind of thing. And when it came to the end of his senior year, I remember there were some Division III schools that were interested in him, and one of them ended up being Hampton-Sydney. And I told Ryan, I was at that time I was the head coach at Wake Forest, and I told Ryan, I said, look, you want to come to Wake Forest and be on our team as a walk-on, I'd be happy for you to do that. We got to play for you. Well, maybe. I don't know that you wouldn't have played a little more than you think, but I mean, I've never forgotten this. Where I'll be a factor in the outcome of the game at the end. And that probably would not have been the case at Wake Forest, but, choosing smartly a Division III school where he could be in the game at the end when the game was decided. That's what he did. And, he ended up being the leading three-point shooter in the history of Hampton-Sydney. And I think that was true up until two or 3 years ago when somebody broke that. But it was the right decision for him. And he made that decision. And I was happy and his mom was happy to support that. And so when you move that forward, I think Ryan's points of you can't want it more than your son wants it or your daughter wants it. You can only make that available and encourage them as you go. Now, I'm in a grandfather's role right now, and I get frustrated sometimes watching my grandchildren. I want them to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go get some shots up, or I want them to stay after practice later, or I want them to but they are different than I was. They were different than their dads. And so we've got to let that kind of play out as it goes. They're good kids. And the only thing I know is, basketball is not a lifetime endeavor for everybody. It has been for me and my family, but it's not like that for everybody. And if kids want to come up and they want to play football when it's football season, then basketball, and then finally baseball or tennis or whatever it happens to be, then they should be allowed to do that. Not allowed to do that, they should be encouraged to do that. And I think that's what Ryan and Lucia have done with their two boys.
Well, I think some people would be surprised, even at your level that you guys have both coached at, that you still have to deal with parents, right? I mean, that's part of the process, is managing parents at the NCAA level as well, right?
I never did that. I didn't have to deal with parents. No. Not at our level. We didn't have to.
Is it more
there was one parent, and I won't tell you who. There was one parent took his son as a transfer, and he was basically very visible in the community. And every now and then he would say something about our team before his son got there. And whenever his son and I decided we were going to take him as a transfer, I said, get your mom and dad in here first. I want to talk to them. So the kid grew up 20 miles away, and he gets his mom and dad in there, not knowing what I was going to say to him. And I had 2 or 3 write-ups in the local paper where he'd made some comment about how the team was playing. And, you know, we didn't let them shoot enough or play fast enough or whatever it happened to be. And I looked both of the coaches, both of the parents in the eye with the son sitting there. And I said, the first time that we have a conversation about how I'm coaching or about your son's ability or inability to play, then that will be the last time. And we'll pack your kid's son, his clothes, and he's out of here. No, you don't need to be getting into with the parents. You just don't. I mean, you have one conversation with them, but they're not coaching the team. You can't have that. You just can't.
Yeah, the interaction that you want with the parents is like, what's the goal, right? What's the goal for the kids? You know, obviously, it's graduating. You know, you're in college for a reason, and so those types of conversations, like, we want them to be positive. And it's tough, you know, if you're going to get into talking about playing time and all those kinds of things with parents. It's not an easy topic, and you're better off steering clear of that. And it doesn't mean that, you know, you ignore folks. Obviously, you know, we would never ignore folks, but at the same time, you got to be smart, you know, about how you do it, because everybody wants, like, the parents want their kid to be successful. And so I always try to keep that in my mind. I want my son, you know, to be successful, my sons. And so there's that natural pull there. You're not as, you know,
objective.
You're blinded, because it is your kid and you see it a certain way, and that's okay. But at the same time, coach's responsibility is to do what he thinks is right and what the staff thinks is right for the team.
I've never met a coach that didn't want the best for every player. Yeah. And I never met a coach that is not going to play his best players. Yeah. They're just going to play their best players. They are. It just becomes a matter of how they look at it versus how the parents or media look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that perspective that a parent is approaching it from one person and you're approaching it from 12 to 15 people. Sure. Completely different perspective. So, yeah, really, really good stuff, really good insights in terms of that. So, Coach Dave, do you get a chance to go visit Ryan frequently and be able to watch practice and support him in that way?
I was up there the last week in September, I believe, for about a week and had a chance to look at his team. And I'll certainly get back for some selected games. That first year he was up there, I think I went a lot more. To be quite honest with you, it's a lot easier on me watching it on TV. I don't get so hung up. My face don't get as red. My wife, of course, she's worse than I am. She starts walking from one room to the other, and she's watching it on her laptop, and I'm trying to watch it on the TV, and I hear her screaming, you know, about 3 or 4 rooms away, and it's just it's probably not conducive for me to go to too many games. I want him and his team to do well so much that's better. But the answer is, yeah, I'll probably get to 3, 4 games live this year, maybe more, 5 or 6. I like to go up there when I can see two times on one trip. And now I have to factor in when I go, his younger son, Owen, My grandson is 13 now, and he's on a 7th grade team, and I want to go and see him play. And then Connor, the older grandson, is on the high school team, and I want to go see his team play. So, when I go up to Annapolis, I need to go and plan to stay so I can see all of these things at one time on one trip.
Obviously, your dad's welcome to come anytime he wants, I assume, Ryan?
He is. I was a little surprised when he said 4 and then it went to 6. And then, we'd love to have him that many times if he wants to go. Yeah. That's an interesting question that, you should definitely ask your next father-son tandem, whoever that is going to be, because the roles have reversed now, right? So my college buddies could tell you, I used to watch games on TV and, I lose my mind watching it because you have no control. You want, your loved one to do so well, but you don't have any control over what happens. And, the higher the stakes, the more media coverage that's there, the higher the level. Every game's on TV. Every game is picked apart after the game by the media folks and by the people in your town and beyond nationally. And you know what that brings. And so there's a lot of pressure that goes on in our game and for the coaches. And, obviously the coaches are well compensated for that. And it's just part of it. It's part of our business. Everything is evaluated, but that doesn't make it easy on the families. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. The wives, are the ones that deal with a lot of that. And it's not easy to deal with. And certainly the sons and daughters, that when their father's getting criticized, it's not easy to take because it's right out there in the open for everybody. And you kind of have to have thick skin and understand it's part of it. And but it's interesting that the roles have kind of reversed now. Dad has a hard time watching our games in person.
Well, and that speaks to what was your strategy for, do you read social media? Do you stay away from it, Dave, or how do you approach it now?
In order to do that, you have to know how to use it. I don't. So
makes it easy, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, it's not a problem for me.
Go back to your coaching. You never read anything, right?
No, I never read the local newspaper or periodicals or Blue Ribbon Sports or anything else back in them days. That stuff, what it does is it causes you to bias yourself against yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it and this is somebody else's opinion of what your team is supposed to be like and how it's going to do. And I never wanted that to influence what I felt about my team. I never thought anybody knew more about my team than I did. If they did, they ought to be coaching, not me. So, I tried to stay away from all that stuff and just do my deal day by day by day by day. And that worked better for me.
It's great. As we wrap this up, maybe Dave, let's start with you. Any advice to the parents out there who have children that would like to go into the coaching profession and follow their footsteps?
Well, it can be a great life. It can take you places you can't go on your own. It really can. I always try to tell my players, and I certainly Ryan and Lane, my two boys, that you should use the ball. Don't let the ball use you. You follow the ball, let it kind of take you where you want it to go, but you direct it, and you don't fall in love with the game so much that it actually ends up abusing you. It can be a wonderful life, but you certainly have to stay in control of it. And can't tell you exactly how to do this, but every day gives you an opportunity to be successful. And it's not only a life of success on the basketball court, but it gives you an opportunity to be successful as a human being. And somehow or another, you've got to find the balance that successful people, happy people find. And, it's a difficult thing, but that's what you've got to do. When you go to work, you leave all your family problems behind you. You practice, you correct, you put in, you do better. And then whenever you leave that gymnasium, the practice floor, you certainly leave that behind and you go home and you have dinner with your family and you talk with them about the day And it always helped me have a semblance of balance in my life that I think was very healthy.
And it's more challenging nowadays because of social media. Everybody has a phone, right at their fingertips, a computer, a laptop, whatever you want to call it. And it's immediate, information at all times. And coaches feel a need to have that on. And I agree with that. And I'm not great at it. Lucia reminds me, when I get home to put it down. And, I do my best to do that. But she does have to remind me because we all need nudges and reminders. And that's what we do for one another. But I do like what you said there, Dad, just the balance in life of, going as hard as you can, to help the kids that are under your watch have the best experience that they can possibly have. And then I'm not talking about just, winning a ton of games. Everybody wants to win, but are they having a good time doing it? Are they enjoying their time, being a part of this team and this university? I think that's kind of what sticks out to me. And then when you go home, doing the same with your family and, giving them the appropriate time.
Last thing, Chris.
Yeah, please, Coach.
We always did, and I don't know that we were great at it, but we always tried to have our nighttime meal together. All four people had to be there, unless it was something that just tore you away. But we expected on normal nights to have all four there. And of course, back when they were growing up, there was no social media, so we didn't have to worry about the phones and all. But if I were coming along now, you can bet there would be no phones at the dinner table. There'd be no phones. That should be family time, and you should talk about, hey, how was your day today? Tell me about your day today. How about your teacher? How about your girlfriend? How about whatever it happened to be, but that should be family time.
No, that's great advice. And all this is wonderful advice. And maybe I forgot to ask this earlier, and I'm curious, was it encouraged that Ryan and your other children would come to practice and be able to be a part of your time at the facility? And then to you, Ryan, maybe is that something that you encourage your kids to be a part of?
Well, Ryan knew that he was always welcome at our practice. I know he did. If you go back as far as when I was an assistant at University Hall, he was in, what were you in, about the third grade in, something like that?
Yeah, we were third grade to about ninth grade. Yeah.
Yeah, he would hurry home from his third grade school. First thing he'd do is throw his books down, jump on his bike, and ride a block and a half to University Hall, down the well, into the arena itself, park his bike over on the side, and then sit down on the bench and talk to Jeff Jones, who at that time was a graduate assistant on the Virginia staff. So he saw the best of the best. I mean, the best players, player of the year in the country, Ralph Sampson. He saw him practice for a couple of years, and he saw Terry Holland and Jim Larinaga. He saw Jeff Jones. He saw Craig Littlepage. And, he saw all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, he was encouraged to come, and I think it had an influence on his life, a good influence.
Same for you now, Ryan?
Yes, absolutely. And, I think the one thing I'll mention is as the kids get older, as I began to get into high school, it became a little bit harder because now all of a sudden you're playing, and you're having your own high school practices. And so I wasn't really afforded that opportunity. Once he went to Wake Forest, I was playing at that point. And so it was kind of more about, what's going on with my team and my friends at that time. But in the formative years, when he first introduced the ball to me, absolutely. And I will tell you, the guys that I've worked for over the years, starting out with Seth Greenberg, Jeff Jones, when I was working for Jeff at American, it was all about family. He was open to, Connor, who was a young one at that particular time coming over, and Seth took it to a whole different level. I mean, Connor was welcome in the gym anytime to shoot and be around, for practices. And we've tried to, continue that here, at UMBC. I have, my assistants have kids, and they're always welcome at practice. I don't close the practice to anyone. And, the way I look at that is we try to recruit really good people first and foremost into our program. And so the way I look at it is those guys are like older brothers, to my kids. And I want them to be around. I want my kids to be around my players and the rest of my staff, because it truly is. It's a family. And I look at the guys that we currently have as older brothers for Connor and Owen. And it was like that for me growing up.
Well, great perspective. And, clearly another benefit of that is that you're both modeling parenting to many young people that don't necessarily have great parental role models. And I think anyone that can do that, I think that's an incredible, incredible service to the world. So great stuff. Coach, is anything to leave us with?
Invite me up to Windsor, man. I'd love to come back, bring a team.
Well,
the leaves are turning up here.
Coach, I'd love to host you, but I moved to Palm Desert, California. So even better, much warmer right now. So
wow.
Come anytime you want.
It's not so warm that you're feeling all those fires out that way, are you?
No. As of right now, they're well out of our area. But it's different places and different things happening all the time. I mean, it's you leave snow and you're dealing with something else.
Well, I'll add this. I mean, Chris, I just want to give you a shout out, man. What you're doing with this podcast is tremendous. I can't tell you how many people, have said nice things about what you're doing with this. And, I hope this one was, as technical as probably not, it won't be as technical as some of the others, but, hopefully you'll be able to grow this type of interview here, if you want to call it that. And hopefully you'll be able to get some other father-son connections on here. I think it would be really neat perspective, because you'll get some different stuff. But thanks again for having Dad and I on.
Yeah, no, tremendous. And I really enjoyed it, and wonderful format. So thanks for suggesting it. And thanks to you both for coming on. And Ryan, we wish you a great season. And Dave, where can we find your podcast?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Wait a minute. My engineer is going to tell you.
Okay. We can post it as well, along with the podcast.
NABC.com. There you go.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome.
We've had some really good ones. I just don't know how to get to it.
Oh, that's okay. I'll link it in the show notes, Coach.
Thanks for the invite.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
To find out more about Coach and all we spoke about today, please take a look at the show notes for today's episode. I love to share the game and have basketball coaching conversations, so connect with me on social media. You can find all my social media information and all your membership, clinic, and consulting needs at basketballimmersion.com. That concludes today's episode. I know there are so many podcasts out there. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Basketball Podcast with me, your host, Chris Oliver. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues so that we can keep bringing you the best of what's out there and share the game.